Hi, Elizabeth Nader here, back with you, Jersey First TV, the Nader Narrative, a really important subject to bring you, and that is about learning from history and what we have gone through in the past 2 years with COVID mandates. And I want the audience to be introduced to a pretty amazing woman, Shulamit Lazarus. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
I'm so happy. So happy to have you here. You inspired a lot of people recently. You were at a Hanover Township Board of Education meeting, and I'm going to tell the audience why you were there. There was a Board of Education member who had posted a meme on Facebook, on social media, about Anne Frank, and really tying the experience of the laws back then that were immoral that resulted in her death and many, many others, and really making an analogy to the immoral mandates that we're facing and have faced in the past 2 years with COVID. So this, of course, caused a major eruption in the community. And what was nice to see is quite a few people come out to the Board of Education to support this man and to tell their story. So this brings us to you, Shulamit. You stood up very bravely and you read something that you had written about why you as a Jew are not offended by this meme that this individual posted, and you began to tell your story. So tell us what you hope to get across that evening.
What was happening at the time when I learned about it, the meme, so it's about a person, right? A human being that has a name that people can learn about. And certainly by seeing the video, but I'm not sure if he wants to have his name. So I'm just going to leave that alone, right? However, take that more abstractly, right? What's really going on is a certain pattern of persecution, using something, twisting it, and putting it out almost as a piece of propaganda. You know, I was just reading about Goebbels today and how he did propaganda that galvanized and motivated, you know, seemingly good meaning German people to allow atrocities to happen. So when I heard what was going on and how he was being persecuted and potentially even being sued, and that Jewish teachers were involved in the persecution of him in terms of insensitivity, I was stunned, because that meme was so perfect. Like, that meme was in macrocosm of this 2 years that we've gone through. It held it in microcosm just in that one picture.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I didn't intend to speak. I was just sharing my thoughts. And then I was asked to speak. So what I did was write something, because I know I'm not linear. And so I wanted to make sure that I had those 5 minutes and used it as efficiently as I could. But God had another idea, and just the arc took 25 minutes. So we tag teamed.
Right.
The whole thing.
Right. Well, so we're gonna lead you kind of through what you said that evening. And, you know, this has been controversial, because anytime you bring up the Nazis, anytime you bring up the atrocities of World War II, there is a reaction, a strong reaction from all sides on this. But your point was in support of this meme, which was basically saying there are parallels between, you know, the people that he said the people that hid Anne Frank were breaking the law back then. Imagine that. And the people who killed her were following the law. And he said substitute law in this with executive orders or mandates, and making the point that the law is not a moral compass. So you have a lot of intelligence and emotional intelligence related to what happened to the Jews, because your family was involved back in the Holocaust. So I want you, first of all, Shulamit, to tell us, what are the parallels here between what you have seen our country and the world experience in the past 2 years, and the parallels with what brought us to the point where people went along with exterminating, killing millions of people. Tell us about the parallels.
So what I started noticing right away, and those of us who have any kind of intimate relationship to the Holocaust. I mean, my aunt had a number branded into her arm, and my mother screamed every night, practically running from Nazis. So, and you didn't have to speak about it, and a lot of people didn't speak about it, right? But we were taught over time. Like, I still remember the cracking of the glass in Kristallnacht so many years later. And the posters that had the Jews with the rodents on them, the vermin on them, you know, associating them with disease, right? So that was part of what was happening. And so what I started noticing, I mean, the thing that really got me starting to pay attention was when people were calling 9/11 on somebody who was walking on the street. I was stunned and terrified because I knew that there was something going on. And then when I started paying attention to how people were being vilified, right? If they decided not to get vaccinated for their own intelligent reasons, right? When they wanted to have freedom of choice over what goes on into their body, they were vilified, right? And they still are on some level, yeah. Right? So much so that I haven't gotten to see my granddaughter in 2 years. I haven't been allowed because I'm not vaccinated. You know, it doesn't matter that I tell people God vaccinated me, right? Because I had natural immunity and could show it. It doesn't matter because the meme, right, on the main news was saying unvaccinated, unhealthy killers, right? So that's what started happening, programming people to think a certain way and connecting them with emotion. See, that's really important. Hitler was excellent at it. Yeah. I mean, you know, I studied hypnotism, and if you shut the volume down, you see him all over the place. He's getting all the people riled up emotionally. Well, if you look at the mainstream news, right, then you start seeing how, in terms of what they say, they tend to say the exact same thing. So that's already programming. But the other thing is they make it very emotional, right? And they grab people by their emotions, and then they put out a message that the unvaccinated are disease spreaders. This is exactly what happened, but it was the Jews, right? Right. So I saw that, and then I saw people would have a play date, and the police would show up because somebody was calling somebody in on a play date, right? I saw that. I also saw how when they started certain social media that allowed people to have freedom of thought and freedom of speech, I think it was Parler at that time, people were actually being told, watch the apps that your kids are using, go in when they're not around, and go in and look at their apps and see what they're saying and who they're talking to, right? Because these are hate spreaders. And so what I always also noticed, that there was a constant push towards divisiveness. And it turned out that Goebbels used that racism to create that divide. So you have to create contempt, you have to create hatred. The formula is so clear to me. It's objectify, vilify, exterminate, right? So when you objectify, like I just recently heard, and I can't give you the name of this person, but I was stunned to find out that we have death panels now in our hospitals, and that there's somebody in the Biden administration, and I think we need to look into this because ethicists are missing. There's no moral ethicists anymore. That when somebody has dementia, since we have such a scarcity of resources, we shouldn't waste it on somebody with dementia. So there is this, and getting rid of babies also is part of that, right? It's deciding who is inferior, who is not worthy anymore of life, right? So you see it on both ends. Well, this happened at that time also.
Well, let me ask you something, because the parallels are just so many. it doesn't happen overnight, right? And I've heard watching documentaries with Holocaust survivors and their relatives, and why didn't you push back? Why didn't people stand up? And it was, we get there step by step, and it was this process that took a few years before suddenly people would literally be willing to turn in their neighbors, other humans, and have zero regard for their life. So you see the process. When you look back on the 2 years that we've been through, is it, from your standpoint, did you feel like we were marching towards a similar place?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very step-by-step incremental process of changing the perception of people to see someone as less than human. It takes a very long time,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a manipulation of the search engine results. I mean, the other day I was looking for parallels, and there's a woman named Vera Sharav who's well known, who's a Romanian Holocaust survivor, who was in the camps at 3. She said actually it was the children that went first.
Wow.
And that's a piece that I didn't know. And then I remembered back, yes, it was the children, and this push towards the children is astounding. What's going on now to vaccinate all of them, and also the discriminations. I'm going to get back to what you said, but the discrimination between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated children, the quarantine times between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated children. This has been promulgated bit by bit by bit through the school system, right? And this is what one of the things that this man was trying to point at in the meeting. I hadn't met him yet, but when I heard him say that, I said, this is exactly what my statement is about.
Right.
It's that kind of discrimination. And so it's been 2 years. So little by little by little, you have this shifting of perceptions, right? As to who's worthy, as to who's not worthy, who's inferior, who should suffer, right? It's amazing when I heard some of the things that people were saying on mainstream news. And the other day when I was looking for people, some people besides me and Vera Sharav and Rabbi Michael Green, who's somebody else, an Orthodox Chabad rabbi, is saying the exact same thing. When I looked online to see the parallels that people brought in terms of their own thinking to the lead up to the Holocaust, they were all about Trump. It's like the search engines just wiped away whatever they didn't want other people to see. I was stunned.
Why are we, parts of our society are in denial of history or refusing to embrace it? I mean, we see this from the standpoint of taking it out of the classroom, right? Not teaching history in a unbiased way, not including all the details, sort of whitewashing history, if you will, or just avoiding certain things. We see that in the classroom more and more, but we also see a visceral response, and I'm sure people will have the same thing listening to this, to any analogy to what happened in the Holocaust. Why are we in denial?
Yeah, so there's something called cognitive dissonance. It's a psychology concept. And when we have a certain picture about how something is, if something doesn't fit, we ignore it. And so the people in Germany, the Jews in Germany, they had it good. You know what I mean? They were ensconced in the culture and the society. They were doing well. So many said, this is not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. Right. And so when you try and talk to people about the parallels now, they go, oh, it's not happening. It's not happening. Meanwhile, those people that are paying attention are going, oh my God, it's definitely happening. Not only is it happening, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. And so the reason why, some people don't call it cognitive dissonance. Some people call it bias confirmation or confirmation bias, whatever. But basically, it's like a child who adores her father, and he also is an alcoholic. and he is hurting the mother, the child will not see it.
Mm.
No, because it doesn't fit the concept that I have of him.
Yeah.
Right? Daddy tells me he's so wonderful and he's so loving and kind to me. He must not possibly be able to do this other thing. Is this heinous thing? No, I'm not going to look at that. Right? So people learn how to shut themselves off. Right? And so when you try and reach somebody who's in that state, it's virtually impossible for them to see what's going on.
So we have that happened back in the 40s, as you say, in the lead up, because it really started much before the war started. We know that. And we have it happening now. So
Exactly.
This reaction, I mean, when people go and look at the video from that Board of Education meeting and the reactions all around, it's amazing on both sides how emotional it really was. In your opinion, are people, I want to say, waking up? I don't know what other term to use, but are they starting to see this from a broader standpoint? Are more and more people starting to understand the dangers of what we've been subjected to in these past 2 years and where that could lead? Do you believe they're waking up?
I wish I could say yes, but I don't.
Wow. Still not.
I don't, because what happened that night was so, I literally was watching before I got up to speak, there was some speakers that then they were vilifying this person, right? And some Jewish people were vilifying and being upset and crying and saying, this is, I have a background, with people in the Holocaust, and have completely missed it. But at that same time, the other teachers in the black masks, which are in there, they stood up and they were standing the whole time the other people were speaking. So there's this lockstep mentality that I'm seeing, right? And then when I was speaking, they were speaking. So they weren't giving me the decency of the silence I gave them. And sadly, there was somebody that was trying to get them to be quiet, and he got a bit emotional. So he ended up getting thrown out, right? So what ended up is that these people stood up in lockstep, right? And then sat down, were talking while I was speaking. Then after that, what ended up happening was an article was written about it, leaving me out, leaving everything else out, just putting in the vilification of this person again because of the meme. Then it went on to the town doing that. So I went to the township and spoke. And then it went to a Federation for the Holocaust that did that. So you see the persecution keeps getting bigger and bigger. Plus, this person who was trying to help me, to support me so that I would be listened to, right? They found out that he's a volunteer fire person, and they found out where he was volunteering, and they wanted to get him thrown out of there.
Wow.
So you see, I wish I could say yes, right? But look at what happened. Look at what happened.
So more persecution, as you say, more intimidation, and more people trying to separate, be divisive. And I'm shocked at anyone who is part of the remembrance of the Holocaust or chooses to, try to keep that in our memories. I'm amazed at the disconnect that they would not see things correctly. How is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it totally is a disconnect. And again, when I mean, many people don't know how hypnosis works, but the way hypnosis works is to anchor something to emotions, right? So, I mean, ideally you want to anchor to positive emotions, right? But propagandists and Goebbels has been studied. These propagandists, Hitler, Goebbels, they have been studied, and their ideas have been brought into the propaganda that's in the news, right? In the mainstream, which is, I mean, it's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's possible that some people are waking up because there's less and less viewership
Yes.
more viewership of the things that we're doing right now,
Right.
and alternatives,
Right.
right? But there's less and less viewership to the mainstream news, but still a lot.
Right. Right.
Still, right? And so what ends up happening is that you're programming through this emotional anchoring to a certain image, and they manipulated the image. Project Veritas exposed CNN for manipulating COVID images.
Right.
And now they're going to go into climate. So they don't connect the two.
Right.
You know, I just want to take a moment to show you something, and that is that this is, and I'm not very good technologically.
There you go. Right there. Yep.
There. This is my grandmother and my
Mm.
grandfather, Bobby and Zaidi, we say in Yiddish. And she organized the smuggling of the children and their family out. They divided them and they smuggled them. So, you know, my mother went with some brothers and went with my Zaidi. And then my, sorry, it's not easy to show.
That's okay. We
But
saw
anyway,
it. Yep.
yeah.
There you go.
So yeah, and the others went with my grandmother, and then they escaped. And my mother was 12 years old. She had just been in the hospital for something called osteomyelitis, which is an infection in her thigh bone, and literally had just come home and was still healing. And my grandfather pulled her out of the house and said, "We need to run.
Wow.
We need to run now."
Wow.
And so I have, because now people are forgetting the Holocaust.
Yes.
They're not really teaching it as much. And actually, there are some people that believe that the Jews created it. And then there are other people who said the Jews never died in the camps, in the ovens. They didn't die there. They had nutritional issues. So, or they were working in the camps and they had nutritional. It's astounding to me. But anyway, so what ended up with my mom, I'm just going to show you a picture of my mom, is that, I mean, I sort of feel like I'm picking up where my mom left off. But
sure.
Here's my mom.
Yeah.
So, and that, you know, many of those people are not here. And there's my mom in Cuba. So they ran to Cuba first. Oops, I'm so sorry. But my mother had to go through the forest at 12 years old, you know, walking, terrified to snap anything, you know, terrified to make, even breathe, right? Because then they would be caught and sent to the camps. And then she literally was eating dried beans. I mean, I have everything here. It was in Yiddish, and then my uncle translated it into English. Literally eating dried beans off of a table. So it's just astounding. And it's not something that happened overnight. That was the culmination, right? You had to change the perception of the people.
Yes.
And then you had to make it okay to persecute them.
Right. You dehumanize
Exactly.
them. And I think that's what, and again, I invite people to go to YouTube and find this. We'll put the link in the comments when we publish, but your speech was so well done in making the parallels that would really be hard to argue against. So I guess the question is, going forward, how do we change this? How do we get people to truly see the truth? How do we get them to embrace history? You know, history is so key, and people say it so flippantly. Well, you need to learn it so you don't repeat it again. But I don't know that we've done a good job of that. Shulamit, how do we move forward? How do we get people to wake up and understand that we are at risk of repeating some pretty awful things?
So I think that the best way to have it repeated is to erase history, right? So we need to do the opposite.
Yeah.
We need to have people coming to speak about the Holocaust and to the lead up, because even inflation was involved. Like there's so much.
Yes, that's so true.
You know, the loss of value of the dollar.
That's right.
Like it goes on, right? And so to show the parallels, which is what I did in the township meeting, is I read, because I had a small amount of time and nobody to tag team me, right? I read a part of Vera Sharav's piece which she put out on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then I went, the Jews, the unvaccinated. Like I kept flipping it back, right? And so to show how they are similar, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfectly exact. It's a pattern. That's what we need to look at, right? And then we need it to be taught to children. We need children to understand, and it needs, just like the Constitution. We don't know our rights, so that's how we lost them.
We don't know our rights, and that's how we lost them. And you make an incredible point. It was also an economic situation that led to this. There were so many things that put pressure on that nation, on the economy, on people, that allowed then for this change to happen and slowly but surely begin to affect them and how they look at each other. And this is the key. It's education, and it's people like you speaking out, and it's all of us supporting that, the idea that our children need to understand this. And you're right, Shulamit, that not only do they need to understand what happened then and other times where there has been genocide, but they also need to understand their rights and the Constitution. And, there are individuals who are trying to make sure we're teaching that in school. So clearly, the fight really is centered with our children. Clearly, the fight is in the school system and in the family. And if anybody can take anything from this, it's to dig into the history and ensure that the next generation understands it in the right context, and use it as a cautionary tale, which history is intended to be. I could talk to you for a much longer time. You're a fascinating person, not only in the history of your family, but your willingness to speak out, and also what you do to help other people see change in their life. And I believe you'll be a change agent in this country for good. So thank you for coming on and sharing just a little bit of your viewpoint, and for standing up for people willing to say the truth. That's what you did. You stood up for this man. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of Americans who want to see that change in our country. So thank you, Shulamit.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. And to everybody, we'll see you